Fine, let's get going. So it's nice and easy. I've just a couple of people have asked recently what this is. It's actually the lower part of a hook I had my punch bag from. And I realised that somebody asked me the other day if I was teaching in a chapel. No, I think a chapel would be quite nice to teach in. I mean, I have taught in them at times, and they are quite a nice feel about them. But this is just a room in my house, basically. And I would normally have a punch bag hanging there, but I haven't got rid of it to have it. So I would move up and see the hook. If anything, it looks a bit like an old-fashioned gibbet, but that's not the first image. In case you're wondering what that was. Yeah. So, nice and easy and gently. Warm myself up a bit more. Let your attention come to rest on details of posture and movement as far as you're able to do that. The detail that you achieve, but it's partly dependent on what's comfortable, what you're aware of, so how long you've been practicing, what's significant to you at this particular time. But in general, what we're looking for is to have our weight slightly forwards in our feet. So if you were standing in sand, say, then if you carefully took your foot away after a while, the front part of your footprint would be deeper. And there's several ways of thinking of that. One is that 70% of your weight is in the front half of your feet. Another way that you can think about it is that there's a focal point just behind the ball of each foot on the midline of the foot. And it's not necessarily the case that that's where your weight is, but I tend to think of that spot as being like the plug of the bath. So if you were to take the plug out of the bath and water way through that one point of the bath. And it's at the location of an acupuncture point called the bubbling well. And what that does is it gives you two things really. One is a slight angling forwards, which can be a bit uncomfortable if you're static. And the other is this, that you're about to take a step forwards. And that feeling is partially neutralized by your hips dropping back, which just, it shouldn't bring your weight further back because your pelvis tucks under, but it just stabilizes you a little bit. But one of the interesting things about this posture, when it's a static posture, is that with just a slight lunge forwards, you would end up taking a step forwards. So it's a posture that has almost enough energy to take a step. And gives you this longer feeling in your back. And that's an important thing to consider, because what we don't want is a sense that when we're standing, we're kind of slumped. They're like leaning against the wall with the energy. Just the act of lengthening your back in that gentle way can actually kind of energize you a little bit. So the posture itself brings you to a position where the blood can circulate a little bit more, and because of your back supporting the front of your body, the breathing can deepen. You're wasting less energy. Just raise your arms. It's quite an interesting change that we go through when we come into the Tai Chi posture. Because it's almost like, if you can imagine, if you're sitting watching television or watching a film, sit down thinking it's a bit boring, and you're half falling asleep, and suddenly something happens. And it's sort of, we say it brings you to the edge of your seat. We go from this silent position to a more upright position. Suddenly everything's alert. And that's when there's a stimulus coming from outside in. But we get the same effect when it comes from inside out. So there's something very energizing about just taking this position, which is why quite often we find ourselves in Tai Chi seminars and things like that, simply standing. And one of the things you can do, I think, if you're feeling you're working on screen all day, for some reason or another, you're feeling that kind of positive energy that we can get very easily in some situations. Taking a few minutes to stand or to sit in this more open, you can go outside and do it, can be very energizing in itself, because it just allows for the circulation within your body to improve, become labor. And if you are especially imagine this as well, using the Tai Chi, when I stand, the position that I have is the chin is pulled in slightly, and I'm looking out. Remember this idea of looking out, standing on the hill, looking out over the valley, or looking out over the sea. There's all just little things that we can bring into our life through practice. And so it's a quality that we want to somehow maintain whilst we're going through the movements. So it's always starting very simply, let your hips sink back a little bit and push up. So what we do when we do this is we kind of add that energized posture, this less simple movement, allowing gravity to come down, feeling the springiness of our body, in particular our legs, pushing us up. And so once again, there's a kind of energizing element there. It helps you to use your breathing as well. Then see what it feels like to take a breath in as you push up and your body expands. Breathe out as you sink. You don't have to do that every time by any means. You don't have to do it like that at all. Just keep breathing. And then bring your hands around, so you're cradling the ball, and push up and sink down. So the posture itself and that very simple up and down movement actually introduce energetic qualities to our bodies and indeed our minds. And we use the movements to spread that around, to cultivate that energy, maybe be able to identify those parts of the body where you don't feel that movement, that energy, to gradually get them to release. And always remembering that in Chinese medicine, that flow of energy is very much linked in with our health. Good harmonious flow through the body is a basis for good health and well-being. And then change into the wild goose. And as always, the different movements will encourage movement in different pathways, different parts of our body. And indeed will have different effects on our minds. The image of the bird in flight has a particular quality. Perhaps I remember one regular student of mine, they always said they used to live in Norfolk underneath the flight path of the wild geese and had very happy memories of living there. So they were very fond of this exercise because of that. So we build a personal relationship with these people. And then Heart in the Clouds. Nice expansive feeling, the opening, quality starting out behind the clouds. This isn't us trying to fool ourselves into the state of mind and body. This is actually making use of our natural responses to imagery and memory and so on and so forth to actively bring about change. But let's do this little sequence of 3, going back to the first of these, just to reinforce that awareness of the change from one movement to another, however we experience it. The thing that doing these little sets of movements in this way, so repeating the sequence over and over again, will do is it will help to improve your powers of focusing. I won't say concentration because I think that has a slightly different quality about it. That ability to stay in touch with the movement, to lose that ability to bring our attention back, which is, I think, one of the more difficult elements in Tai Chi. The imagery doesn't always help with that, of course. If we get too distracted by the image and by its associations, then the problem. So that's maybe when we find that get a bit carried away with the image of boost, which I can easily do. I'm a bit of a bird watcher, so I can easily start thinking, yeah, maybe go and see geese in Norfolk or something like that. That's when, again, a physical awareness, positioning of your feet, hips, can help to counteract that a little bit. So let's just, this is the last one going into sorry, part of that. And then dragon plucks the stars. So we have different ways of focusing on attention, different things that we can bring to bear. One isn't necessarily better than what we want to try and do is to develop our skill at doing both, at doing all of them. Just when our attention starts to waver from one particular approach, rather than forcing ourselves to stay with, say, an image or a physical awareness, we can just gently guide our thoughts into another element to do with Tai Chi. And that's why I tend to avoid the term concentration. So I think we often associate concentration with a very hard-edged approach, and that's something we want to avoid in Tai Chi. Do one more of these. And then pushing in four directions. Another movement that has sort of different elements linking up, different parts linking up. And the key part of the body at this point is the center of the body. And that becomes an increasingly important point of focus, especially if you're interested in the Tai Chi sequences and if you're interested in developing this art, an increased focus of attention on that middle part of the body is very much part of the progression. We refer to it sometimes as the lower dantian. The term dantian translates as something like field of elixir or field of energy. And as I've probably said to some of you before, it's not a fixed thing. Different systems, different approaches, they have slightly different views of the location of the dantian. I'm referring to it as that area between your hips and your waist, the whole of that area. Sometimes it can be a very specific point. Notice the change from one stage of this exercise to another. Which parts of the body are most active, which parts of the body more engaged with a kind of subtle stabilizing quality. You feel particular movements. You may notice a difference between turning in one direction and another. That's not uncommon. We vary from one movement, from one side of the body to another. Do this one more time. And as we get more skilled with that interaction between mind and body and the use of imagery and use of awareness of posture and so on and so forth, so we become more skilled in actually applying ourselves to releasing those areas that are blocked and still to actively engaging with this flow of movement, this flow of energy through the body. And then the hands drop down, circling palms. And then, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. and then switch sides. And then add in the turn. Once again, turning from that middle part of your body. Now, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, using the rotation of the centre down here vertically. Noticing how, just if you can, it's not easy. You can just let go a little bit in your lower back and your hips, your buttocks. At this point, you'll start to come up into that lovely, energized, open position. It probably won't last more than a few moments, especially not to begin with, but at least you'll be able to come back to it. So this time, do it one more time. See if you can just come into that position and settle. Stand. See if you can take a couple of slow different breaths in this position. Good. A couple of things about this interaction of mind and body that I'm talking about. First of all, it's interaction. It's not mind over matter. I don't know about anybody else. I find I change from day to day. Some days I can go out and practice, and focus, and everything's going fine. Other days, you're thinking about things. We've all got busy things going on in our lives. Can't quite bring about the focus, but the body's there to help working with all these different elements. Basically, three elements, what are sometimes referred to as three jewels or the three treasures in Tai Chi and Qigong, which is our bodies, the physical part of the practice, our minds in a very broad sense, including feelings, memories, imagery, sensation, as well as our thoughts. And the movement itself, the energy, coming familiar with all of those helps the others. The second thing is, and kind of related to that, and many of you have heard this before, but please don't use this as an excuse to guilt trip yourself, or indeed that others guilt trip you. Sometimes when we talk about things like this, we can get the impression that all you've got to do is think the right thoughts, get your mind in the right place, and the roses will bloom and everything will be fine, and so on and so forth. Life is not that simple. We've all been through some people are even harder. And people think, oh, somehow, you know, they're ill and it's their fault because they weren't thinking right. And that's not what this is intended to do. There are many factors out there. Simply thinking the right thoughts aren't going to affect. What we can do is begin to change little things and to let them build up. So this is not a panacea, nor am I trying to say to you, you just get my face and everything fine. I wish it were that straightforward, but that it isn't. It's not what I'm trying to say to you. So now just begin to transfer your weight. As we developing Tai Chi, as we go through a Tai Chi session, and we go through Tai Chi in our lives, it's almost as though we put layer over layer. When I was a boy, you used to be able to get these encyclopedia things, and you'd maybe get, you get a picture of a human skeleton, and then you'd get a transparent page, and you put it on, and suddenly all the muscles were there as well, and then the blood vessels, and so on and so forth. And we build up Tai Chi in the same way. We start very simple, the awareness of posture, rhythm in the movement, all those basic qualities. Now we're adding a layer onto that. We don't want to lose that basic awareness, which is so important. We want to also be aware of the transfer of the weight and maybe how that relates to this turning in the center of the body. That's usually a natural process. So just letting the body turn along. And this is an exercise that is really a kind of almost a prelude to the one we've been looking at recently, which is stirring the veins. Hold one hand in front of you and just feel it moving with you. Just have it a little bit out of your body. And then go across into one leg, let the arms swing out a little bit, pushing out, around, like you're rolling a ball around. So the basic movement with your arm is that it extends out and then it comes back in. And when that's combined with the transfer of your weight and the turn in, we get that circular loop. And of course, you can also imagine the balls there, rolling the ball around. And if you look here back a little bit closer so you can see, my arm doesn't travel very much to either side of the center line of my body. There's my navel. It goes out a little bit there, but actually from there, it's still very much in front of the navel. So it's quite a minimal movement with the arm. And try your other hand. Extend out a little bit, back. When your arm extends out, it shouldn't be too far. You don't want to lock the arm out. The elbow is still quite bent. Nice and easy. And then both hands together, almost like they're gently tied together, swinging around. I first came across this exercise referred to as polishing the table. You may not like the image of housework very much. I have to say I don't particularly. So if that doesn't work, you just think of rolling the ball or something like that. And you could make this a bigger movement. Now be careful with your hips, your back, your knees. But if we think about what happens with rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, you could do the same sort of thing. As you go forward, you let the hips go back, just extend out a little bit, and then tucking back in. So always remember, this is not a competition. It's your back and your knees. You need to take care of them. You should always feel that you could have moved a little bit further, particularly with these stronger exercises. One more time. And then just shift that, go back in the way. So polishing the table or rolling the ball. Another image people sometimes have is that their hands are just touching the surface of some water, maybe about hip height. If you do feel comfortable with this slight lean forwards, that means that it's not just your arms that are extended, but also your spine. So that's quite nice too. Do one more of these. And again, just it's a very simple exercise, but quite hard to sustain. So this brings us back to, are we able to maintain some kind of focus of our attention? And when we do a class like this, it's an opportunity to really focus on that. And what it helps to do, in my experience, is it means that gradually we develop a kind of constant awareness of these things. This is, again, a very natural function. There are many things that we constantly monitor. I know people who can get in their cars, start driving along, and start to talk about some problem with the car. That it's the sound, the feel of the car. They know it's going on. I've known people say that they can hear their children talking from the next street because they're very attuned to it. So one of the things that we're doing is tuning ourselves in to our own bodies, our own movements in one way or another. That can have a very grounding quality, a very centering quality for us, because it becomes a bit like that kind of anchoring quality is always there. It's always something that we can come back to. And I think when we talk about Tai Chi in terms of stress management, in terms of calming, this is a very important aspect of it. That more and more we find there is this almost like a place we can come back to that is more centered, calmer, quieter, and so on and so forth. Now, have one foot forwards. So once again, bringing your attention to the simple transfer of your weight. Adding to the complexity of the exercise, though it's quite difficult, it can distract you. If you work at it, helps with that development of that quieter place, shall we call it, however you think of it. Because we don't want to go along to our lives always there. We don't live in caves. We don't seclude ourselves away, have encounters and so on and so forth. You wouldn't want to, for instance, walk on the road with a friend and not talk to them because you're so busy concentrating on your called car mentally and then move anything else. So we want to practice allowing it to come into that. It's there, it's available to us, it's useful to us, it's not dominating us. But for the moment, this is where the rest of our attention is. A Tai Chi class, whether it's a short class like this, or a day, or whatever, it's a really good opportunity to reinforce this. It's like you're coming back to the basics, like you strip down the car and you're cleaning it out and you're doing whatever people do. I'm not very good at cars, but you get the idea. So that's a very important part of the process, however long you've been doing Tai Chi. Let's see if you can begin to just raise your toes and your heel. So again, quite a tricky process because we want to make toes but not lean out or anything. So think about how this is done. And I think about every time we move the foot, it's associated with the hip dropping. On the back foot, I think that's probably quite clear. Here, I let my back hip drop, I'll exaggerate. It pushes the knee forwards and the heel comes up. But on the front foot, it's not quite so obvious. Again, I'll exaggerate, my legs overextended. But if somebody were to come along and push on my hip there, that would happen. You see the toes coming up. I was saying that's exaggerated. I normally wouldn't want to lean. So once again, we find, interestingly, that allowing our hips, our body, our hips to yield to the gravity actually helps us to remain upright and to move. And then we can step in. Another example of a movement where just one part of the body is moving. The rest of your body is not passive by any means, it's maintaining this equilibrium. And if you've been doing this for a while and you want an extra challenge, imagine that you've got a golf ball or something just on your foot about there, and as you come forwards, you're trying not to let that ball roll off. So the movement in your foot is very smooth. Alternatively, imagine just pulling your foot through water. And then what I'm trying to do is to offer you ideas about how the practice can progress. If you pick up one or two things, think, oh, that's interesting, that's fine. I'm not expecting people to be able to absorb all of these things. I quite often find, if I do some time with one of my teachers, they'll say something that goes over my head completely, but maybe comes back after a while, maybe they say it again, or maybe in a few months' time I've absorbed it, starts to make sense. So a term that I like to use to cover these arts is that we cultivate. So raising your toes and your heel. For those of you who do a Tai Chi form, all of these qualities are things you will want to have in the Tai Chi forms. It's almost impossible, I think, to really think about a lot of these things while you're doing something quite complex. So it's in exercises like this that we develop the sort of intuitive element that flows into the forms. And then pigeon spreads its wings. Sink back, push forwards, feel your elbows being pushed out, drawing your fingers up. Again, if it's helpful to you, take a breath in there. Push the body out, but then hold your breath. One or two exercises where that can happen in Tai Chi. We don't do them in this session. This is just go back and read it, you'll find in that any kind of focus is difficult. Feel what happens as you go forwards in the front of the body, and then as you go back. When you've done that for a few rounds, feel what happens in your back as you go forwards and backwards. One more time. Now we're going to change to fisherman castanet. If you are interested in the breathing, it changes slightly here. As you come back, you take a breath in, feel your body filling up, and as you go forwards, it's almost like you're breathing out through your arms. So we use the breath slightly differently in this and in pushing away. Again, if you find that a different breathing pattern, a different approach to the breath is better for you, then follow that. It's not worth putting your body under strain. Just to get a kind of imagined correct breathing. And then bringing your hands in and pushing away. And we repeat. The breathing is one divide people who do Tai Chi. There's many things that would do that, incidentally. We always have our own views on these things. One of the people I've been lucky enough to work with, Grandmaster Chen Xiaowang, he's head of the Chen family style of Tai Chi. He's in his 70s now, but he's known for not teaching the breathing. And what he does, the breathing to match the posture. So what he focuses on is good posture, because he said, if I teach you to breathe in a particular way and your posture doesn't allow for that, you will increase the tension in your body, not decrease it. So he says, just learn good posture and then the breathing will come naturally. It's entirely possible, I haven't worked with him that deeply, it's possible that at a much higher level, people got the right posture, that he will teach them breathing. But in most cases, he won't actually talk about the breath. On the other hand, I worked with another teacher who taught me a sequence of movements and then turned around and said, right, you've got to get the breathing exactly right. So there's this whole spectrum there. Really, again, choose which is comfortable to you, and don't think it's this thing. There might be times when you go to practice and the breath is the thing that links the movements up. It might be exactly like you at that point. The next day might be different. Doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It just means that we change from one day to the next, from moment to moment. So again, the breath is a useful reference point. Golden rule: keep breathing. Don't hold your breath. As I say, we're not doing anything in these sessions that should involve that. So now have your other foot forwards and transfer them away. So maintaining that good posture as you move. And remember, the focal point would be just behind the ball of each foot. And when we go forwards, That's fairly straightforward. So you kind of go forward, so the ball of your foot gets pushed into the ground. So that's where the weight will naturally stop and accumulate. Going back, straightforward. Because you feel take the weight first of all. You saw there a little wobble. If I go move my weight into my back leg, my heel is being pushed into the ground. Go back any further, I'm going to fall over. So somehow we want to find a way to bring the weight, to let the weight flow into the front of the foot. And again, we're brought to the significance of this part of the body, that the alignment of your pelvis is going to be very important. Perhaps begin to see how we might end up spending literally hours on just an exercise like this. I was with a group of people, friends of mine, 8 nobody had less than sort of 15, 20 years in Tai Chi. We got together, we started off in the morning, we were staying in the same place. And we started off with just this simple exercise, we were just chatting about it. Somebody was good enough to bring us a cup of tea at some point during that whole process. And eventually the same person came back and said to us, are you coming for lunch? And we spent the entire morning kind of talking about this and trying different things out. We hadn't done anything else, we just stayed with this exercise. And then measuring your toe here. Feel as though when your toes go down, when your heel goes down, your foot sort of sinks into the ground a little bit. Almost like if you can imagine doing something like this on soft mud. So it just kind of sinks down. And likewise, when your heel, your toe comes up, it's not stiff, it's not hard, but there's a little bit of resistance in there. And then stepping. Sinking into the ground. This is why we use the term planting the foot. It doesn't shake out. Okay, that's right. Vision spreads its wings. Feel which parts of the body feeling in tune with the movement, with the energy. Feel there's resistance to that movement anywhere. You try and imagine that movement like a river flowing over a rock. Just very carefully, very slowly, eroding those areas that do feel a little bit stuck, a little bit blocked. And then fisherman cast the net. and pushing a wave or pushing the boat. One more. Rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down. Shoulder. Arm. The other side. Push your back. Around your hips. Your legs. That's on your belly. So remember, if you have any questions, just there's things on Zoom that you can use to indicate that. Feel free to ask questions. Remember, there aren't any stupid questions, and there's no question that's too simple or to ask something embarrassed about it. But often it's the simplest questions that are the most difficult ones for me to answer. And I've often been in sessions, in Tai Chi sessions, where somebody's asked a question and it's like, wish I'd thought of asking that 20 years ago, basically. So feel free to do that. But for now, most time we turn to the mountain. So letting your hips sink down, feeling that settling downwards, and then beginning to push up and out. Your arms down, you're going to hold the ball against your chest, drawing in and then come back to that nice standing position. Or indeed, your legs are 280, you can always down. Feel the alignment of your body. If you are in the chair, try and have a little bit of your weight forwards in the feet, and you'll get the same opening in the back. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Thank you very much, everybody. This session will be up on YouTube soon if you want to go over it again. I'm also planning to put a more detailed look at the exercise stirring the beans that we didn't get around to doing today, but that should be up on the YouTube channel fairly soon, I hope. Okay, so unless you have any questions, thank you very much for coming, everybody.
I have a question?
Yeah.
Question.